This is 77-year-old Graham Kinley. He's suspected of having kidnapped and murdered up to 7 women and girls in Birmingham, England, between 1968 and 1986. For nearly 50 years, he has avoided justice and walked free. And today is no different. We'll be back, Mr. Kinley. You know we will. The police have no motive, no physical evidence, and worst of all, no warrant. But when the system fails, sometimes it takes just one person to bring a cold case back to life. I had a sister I could never stop thinking about. You try to let go, but some things don't let you. James Walker, the brother of one of the victims, has waited 46 years for justice, for his sister's abduction, assault, and murder. And he refuses to wait any longer. I used to sleep in the drainage tunnel, where her body was found, hoping her killer would return. I planned to end it right there. Clara was 17, and I was 12. I admired her. She was beautiful, intelligent, popular. Ryan Moore was Clara's school sweetheart. That Valentine's night, they went out together on a special date. But this wasn't just any night for 18-year-old Ryan. For months, he'd planned to give Clara something meaningful. A promise ring. It was a small rose design, with a diamond in the center. It meant loyalty. It meant forever. She smiled when she opened it. Then they went to the school dance to celebrate with friends. They danced all night. Afterward, they drove off to find somewhere quiet to be alone. They never knew that their perfect evening was about to turn violent. A shadow appeared at the car door. A man holding a handgun. Ryan was struck before he could react. I never saw his face. She screamed. Stop hitting him. I'll go with you. Back at the Walker home, young James was asleep on the sofa when screeching tires woke him. He ran outside to see Ryan stumbling across the lawn, covered in blood. The passenger seat was empty. Clara was gone. She was taken. The following morning, local police and detectives arrived to launch a massive search. Ryan became the prime suspect. Everyone doubted him, except the Walkers. After 3 days, a detective recalled another case. Becky Harris, a girl found dead inside a rural culvert outside Birmingham. The search shifted underground. That's when everything ended. That scream my mum let out. I still hear it. Clara's murder devastated the city. Over 1,000 people attended her funeral. At the service, Ryan noticed something horrifying. The promise ring was missing. Soon after graduation, Ryan left England, moving to Scotland for work, never returning. James, meanwhile, was consumed by anger. He dreamed of revenge. He tried to become a police officer, but a rare genetic condition slowly took his eyesight. By 2020, James was the last Walker, still living in Birmingham. It was the darkest period of my life. My marriage was falling apart, and my father had just died. I know in his heart he felt like he had failed his beautiful daughter by never getting justice for her. By the time Mum passed away, I believe she too died of a broken heart. With everyone around him gone, James's determination to find Clara's killer only grows stronger. Every single year, he does the only thing left to do. He calls West Midlands Police and tries to convince whoever is heading their cold case unit to reopen his sister's file. I asked her, "How many cold cases do you have?" She said, "We have over 900 unsolved murders." I told her, "My heart breaks for every one of those families. But right now, I only care about one." I said, "Whoever did this is either dead, dying, or running out of daylight. And I want the truth." On the other end of the line is West Midlands Police's new cold case investigator, Detective Leah Turner. When I saw what had happened to this young girl, the mother in me just screamed. You think, that could be my child, and you realize, you have to do something. Because of James's call, Detective Turner decides to reopen Clara's case. After 46 years of setbacks and disappointment, hope is finally restored. James has spent his entire life searching for justice for his sister. Now, with a fresh investigator, finally willing to fight for the truth, he's prepared to do whatever it takes. I had a sister I could never stop thinking about. You try to give up hope, but then you realize you can't. Hope is all you've got. Every day is a new day. Detective Turner begins by re-examining the events of Valentine's Night, 1974, when Clara was abducted after the school dance. After the attacker struck Ryan with the butt of his gun, the weapon jammed. As Ryan started losing consciousness, the attacker began clearing the pistol. Realizing he was about to shoot Ryan, Clara stepped forward and offered to go with him if he stopped hurting Ryan. She did what she believed she had to do to save his life. I truly believe she sacrificed herself. I can still see Clara's face. She screamed, "Ryan, go get my dad." I was terrified. Those were the last words I ever heard her say. The last time I saw her. Although the case remained unsolved in 1974, police had followed procedure and collected every piece of evidence available. A full pistol magazine, Clara's torn dress and clothing, and a detail investigators believed pointed directly at Ryan. The promise ring. For reasons no one could ever explain, it had been pulled from her finger and left inside the culvert, beside her body. To this day, we don't know how it ended up there, whether it was taken intentionally or removed during a struggle. Regardless of the ring, Detective Turner refuses to repeat the mistakes of the past. She's determined to identify Clara's true killer and clear Ryan's name. A man who has lived in exile since being labeled a suspect decades ago. She knows modern DNA technology has revived countless cold cases and hopes this one will be no different. All she needs is usable genetic material. I felt completely compelled to help this family in any way I could. We reviewed every single document, every box of evidence. We knew that in 2009, DNA had been recovered from the dress. So we believed there had to be more. And then it happened. A single source, full male DNA profile, was recovered from Clara's bra. We were absolutely thrilled. We finally had something that could actually be entered into the UK National DNA Database. But two major obstacles stood in the way. First, at just 5 nanograms, the sample was the smallest Detective Turner had ever worked with. Any handling or testing carried a serious risk of destroying the fragile genetic material completely. Second, the partial profile they developed did not match anyone already registered in the database. It was really only strong enough to rule people out. It wasn't enough to definitively name a suspect. It gave us a direction, but not a conclusion. We had something to work with, just not enough. Still, Detective Turner knew there was one last option. A private forensic laboratory outside Manchester had developed a cutting-edge method capable of identifying suspects using extremely small DNA samples. The risk was enormous. The process would consume every remaining trace of Clara's DNA. If it failed, there would be nothing left. Success was far from guaranteed, but both Turner and James knew they had come too far to stop. We still had hope, because we believed someone was out there, and we were determined to find out who it was. The gamble pays off. Using the advanced profile, Detective Turner finally gets a name. Graham Kinley. She recognizes it instantly. Suspect number 22. From the original 1974 investigation. Back then, police had questioned every local resident who owned a registered Ruger handgun after a loaded magazine was recovered at the abduction scene. McKinley was one of them. He'd even taken a polygraph test and passed. But DNA doesn't lie. We looked into where he was living now. And he was still in Birmingham. Just a few miles from the old bowling alley near the crime scene. Detective Turner decides to make contact. An officer is sent to the address to speak with the occupants of the house. At first, McKinley reacts with humor, almost dismissive. But his tone changes the moment Turner begins asking specific questions. His wife, Judith, however, isn't willing to let him mislead the detective. As McKinley starts constructing an alibi for the night Clara disappeared and the days that followed, Judith interrupts, correcting him more than once. McKinley has every legal right to refuse further cooperation. But Detective Turner is not deterred. When night falls, she authorizes officers to search through the suspect's refuse, looking for anything that might contain his DNA. We finally had something that could be entered into CODIS, the national DNA database. But even with that breakthrough, Detective Wagner quickly realized the road ahead was anything but simple. Two major obstacles stood directly in her way. The first problem was the amount of DNA. At just 5 nanograms, the sample was by far the smallest quantity she had ever attempted to work with in her entire career. To put it into perspective, this was a fraction of what forensic analysts normally rely on to build a reliable profile. Every single step, testing, transferring, amplifying, came with a very real risk. One wrong move could permanently destroy the fragile genetic material. If that happened, there would be no second chance. The second issue was even more discouraging. The partial DNA profile they managed to extract did not match a single offender already stored in CODIS. No hits, no immediate suspects, no clear answers. It was really only strong enough to eliminate people. It couldn't definitively identify anyone. It gave us a direction, but it didn't give us a name. So yes, we had something to work with, but we didn't have enough. For many investigators, this might have been the end of the road. But Detective Wagner wasn't ready to stop. She knew of one final option. A long shot, but a possible one. A private forensic laboratory south of Houston had recently developed a cutting-edge DNA technology capable of identifying suspects using extremely small genetic samples. The science was new, the results were uncertain, and the risk was enormous. The process would consume every remaining trace of Carla's DNA. If it failed, there would be nothing left to test. The case would once again go cold. This time forever. There were no guarantees. Still, Wagner brought the idea to Jim. Together, they weighed the consequences. Decades of waiting. Years of unanswered questions. A lifetime of grief. In the end, they agreed to take the risk. We still had hope. Because we believed there was somebody out there. And we were going to find out who it was. The gamble pays off. Using the advanced DNA technique, the lab generates a new profile. Stronger, clearer, and far more detailed than anything they had before. For the first time in nearly half a century, Detective Wagner finally has a name. Glenn McCurley. The moment she sees it, it clicks. She recognizes the name immediately as suspect number 22 from the original 1974 investigation. Back then, after a fully loaded pistol magazine was discovered at the abduction scene, police had questioned every local resident who legally owned a registered Ruger pistol. McCurley was one of those men. He had been interviewed. He had cooperated. He had even taken a polygraph test and passed it, with no physical evidence linking him directly to Carla. Investigators moved on. But DNA doesn't lie. Detective Wagner begins digging into McCurley's present-day life. We researched where he was currently living, and it turned out He was still in Fort Worth, only a couple of miles away from the old bowling alley connected to the case. The proximity is unsettling. Rather than rushing in, Wagner decides to take a careful approach. An officer is sent to the residence to speak casually with the occupants and observe their reactions. At first, McCurley appears relaxed. He jokes. He brushes off the questions, as if they're meaningless. But the moment Detective Wagner starts asking specific details about timelines, locations, and the night Carla disappeared, his tone shifts. The humor fades. His answers become hesitant, inconsistent. And then something unexpected happens. McCurley's wife, Judy, steps in. She isn't willing to let her husband mislead the detective. As McCurley begins constructing an alibi for the night Carla was taken, and for the days that followed, Judy interrupts him, correcting details, challenging his version of events. The tension in the room is unmistakable. Legally, McCurley has every right to refuse further questioning. He doesn't have to cooperate. He doesn't have to provide anything. But Detective Wagner isn't discouraged. She knows time is critical. When night falls, she authorizes officers to conduct a trash pull, searching through the suspect's discarded refuse for anything that might contain his DNA. A cigarette butt, a tissue, a coffee cup, anything that could finally confirm what the evidence is beginning to reveal.